Engagers, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of using games and gamification in our daily lives, for example, to learn what we are teaching. And I am Rob Alvarez. I work at Ironhack, teach at IE Business School, University, and so much more, and host this podcast. If you have an extra second, please go ahead and subscribe for free to our email list at professorgame.com/subscribe. Hey, Engagers, welcome back to another episode of the Professor Game podcast. And we have Argyrios Aris Emmanouloudis with us. But Aris, before we kick off, we need to know, are you prepared to engage?
Always. Hello to your audience as well. Hi.
Fantastic. Let's do this because Aris is the coordinator of the Game Arts and Animation Department at the SAE Institute of Amsterdam, SAE Institute of Amsterdam. He has also just finished his PhD in cultural analysis, focusing on the intersection between online gaming communities and the industry. He's not satisfied with just playing video games, and he has always been on the lookout for the deeper, often ignored side of games and their cultural extensions. And he also has a background in journalism and media studies. He has worked as a journalist, interviewer, and events organizer for various popular culture outlets, among them definitely the Arcade Hotel, which is how we got to meet each other. So, Aris, are we leaving out anything that you think we should include?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you for the very nice introduction.
Great, amazing. So, Aris, can you tell us what does a regular day or week, like what does being Aris nowadays look like?
Yes. So as you said, my primary function now is being the coordinator of the Game Art and Animation Department at the SAE Institute here in Amsterdam. So it's pretty much 9 to 5, Monday to Friday job. So it's an office job. That's the basics, since you asked how it looks like. But what makes it interesting and playful and game related is that it's never the same thing. So it's week or each day there is a different challenge because coordinating the teaching process is something that, of course, comes up with many challenges and many different tasks to perform. So day to day, I have to make sure that the schedule is being followed, that all the assignments are being submitted online, and pretty much everybody follows the schedule and everything runs smoothly for the students. At the same time, I have to organize and always be on the lookout and always follow the industry. So be on the lookout for guest lectures, for events for our students, and for finding ways. And this is the reason I applied for this job, creating value for the students. To explain,
you're kind of a game master in that sense.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So I'm not. So let me explain what SAE Amsterdam is. So SAE is a worldwide chain of schools, of creative media schools. We have our campus in Amsterdam, but there are also campuses all over the world, in Europe, but also in Australia, in Asia, America, everywhere. And they have departments in various creative media fields, audio engineering, film editing, and game art, which is our department here in Amsterdam. Of course, there are other game art departments elsewhere. And my position there is not that one of a teacher, even though I have done some theoretical teaching myself. But because I'm not a game artist, a game animator, I don't design games maybe yet. I make sure that the teaching process takes place smoothly. So I am a supervisor, I'm a coordinator, I do admin job, and at the same time, when I get the opportunity, I always I insert, let's say, myself in the teaching process to give some theoretical knowledge about games and game cultures, because and I believe plays a part of everyday life. And by being aware of our status as playful beings, we can understand the world around us. So my goal for my students is not just to create game makers, but to create game makers with a, within quotation marks, library of holistic knowledge and social awareness. So whenever I get the opportunity to teach the students a little more about the games that they're going to create and how the effect that they will have on society when they send them out, I take that opportunity. At the same time, I also do some classes on presentation skills and academic writing, which are needed for the progression of the students, their progression in the program.
Nice. So you got plenty of work going on in there
Yes.
for sure. Lots of stuff going on. Very exciting. So Aris, let's dive deep, right? Because you are all about, games and the cultural and all the culture that could be going on around games and all these things. But we would like to know, you being a PhD and doing all these things that you've done, there's probably been some times when things didn't go as planned, right? So we
Hmm.
want to dig deep
Correct.
into one of those times related to games and to the culture around games. Maybe what we could call your favorite failure or first attempt in learning.
Yes. So I will go back to my to the start of my PhD actually. So I'm about to finish my PhD now, as you said. Hopefully, if all goes well, hopefully there will not be another lockdown, and we will able to, uh, yeah. Uh, Organize and do things as we want. But the idea is that I will defend my PhD on September 9th. So it's almost done. It's written. It's about to be printed, published, and defended. So when I started working on my PhD on cultural analysis and the game industry, I really rushed things. Like I was going so fast, meaning that I wanted to do pretty much everything without taking a moment to think and without taking a moment to breathe. Like I wanted to do uh, all seminars I would see. I would apply for all sorts of journals. I would apply for all sorts of conferences, trying talking to people, coming up with ideas, which is good to have ideas. But when I started, I didn't realize that. I'm still in the beginning of my phase, and I should probably take some time to study my field further and have a clearer idea in my head of what I want to do. So I was just overwhelming and overloading myself with things and tasks, and yeah, it's I didn't realize it's like a marathon. You have to take it slowly, and you have to, like a game, when you start with a tutorial level, then the easier level, normal, medium, hard, and then it's the final boss battle. I didn't realize this, and I was just running so fast, and I was approaching all sorts of people and bombarding them with ideas, and that may be created, some kind of alienation. So my advice would be to not just on a PhD, but also in other tasks. When you start something, take it slow, and like a game, take it level by level. Start with a tutorial, then go on the easy level, normal, hard, and then you can face the final boss. So yeah, take a moment and think, take a moment and breath, and don't always go too fast on something.
So I'm guessing there it's all about taking things at their at their required and appropriate level
Yes,
at the
exactly.
time, right? So it's and getting into flow as well has a lot to do with taking on a challenge that you can actually face and that you're prepared for, and
Right.
that
Yeah.
engages you because it's not too much, it's not too little to be boring, it's not too much to be overwhelming, maybe a little bit too much or a little bit too little, but it's within that zone where you still, it's in the appropriate level. So it has a lot to do with many other things that we do as well.
Yeah, it's like to also use game terms here, like Breath of the Wild, the game on Nintendo Switch, where it's an open world game and you can directly go and face the final boss the moment you start the game, or you can go pretty much anywhere. But if you
Yeah.
don't have the proper equipment, and if you haven't already finished some other tasks and leveled up and get to know the game, then it's quite likely that it won't go the way you wanted. So yes, build up your character and by facing the proper challenges, and select your fights, if I could say that.
Pick your fights, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Like in Dark Souls, that life is kind of in that sense, like Dark Souls. It doesn't forbid you to go in for one of those bosses you have no chance at defeating yet, but they will blast you.
exactly,
You will
exactly.
take a beating, right? So you
And
you just got to
yeah,
learn from that beating and come again, but not to that boss, but to
and
one.
see, we
One
can
that you
learn
can
a
face.
lot. We can learn a lot of things from games. There are so many things that apply to real life and we don't understand. But yeah, like games, life is also about leveling up and being aware of when is the proper place and time for everything.
Huh. Huh. Cool. So actually, let's take a spin on that and actually
Hmm.
go for a time when you were doing something again related to games. Maybe it has to do with your PhD, or not. I don't know. Up to you. Where actually things went right. So a big challenge that you face, and you say, well, let's use my knowledge, my understanding of games, or research of games, and use it to something, and it actually went the way you expected it on the first or the nth time. It doesn't matter.
Nice. So we will make a connection now to the arcade hotel that you mentioned earlier, and to the episode you recorded with Dan Salmanovic. Hi, Dan, if you're listening. Um, so I went to a party that the arcade hotel had organized. So for those that don't know and are new to the podcast, the Arcade Hotel is the world's first video game hotel, which is here in Amsterdam. And apart from including consoles in pretty much every room, not pretty much, but in every room, there's a nice arcade in the lobby, and it's more than just a hotel. It's a hub for people interested in gaming, and apart from playing games, we also organize some game-related events, some pop culture-related parties. There was a Star Wars party. There was some talks on video games that I organized. So to get to that point, I went to the Arcade Hotel one day, and I was really surprised in a positive way, but what I saw there. I saw a really nice place full of games and full of playfulness and, gamification to an extent. And I realized that this is a place that more we can do more than just having people to play games. So I approached Dan one day and I said, hey, I'm doing my PhD on games. I'm fully aware of the positive influences that and the more serious side that games have on culture, and I would like to use this space as a hub for bringing together people also interested in those games. And I proposed this series of talks that at least we used to do pre-pandemic. Now we are bouncing back, and soon there will be more announcements on that. This series on lectures labeled the Arcade Talks, in which every month we would bring someone working in the gaming industry, or sometimes people that I know from academia that are interested in video games from an academic perspective, to give these monthly talks, and then we would all play games discussing the topic that we just talked about. So yes, this was one of the times that it went well, because I found a place and I found a community of people interested in games and interested in exploring what is beyond just mere entertainment in games. And we started these little community meetups of people that wanted to go just beyond this entertaining aspect of gaming, and using a bit more critical thinking and reflection on what games do in everyday life and in society.
That sounds very interesting, and it also sounds very pre-pandemic.
Yes. But yeah, as I said, we are now in the process of bringing this back.
Coming back, yeah,
We are
that's what I
working
was
on
going
it.
to
Yeah.
say. It sounds very interesting, and like a very, very good stuff. Engagers, if you're out there in Amsterdam, start reaching out to the Arcade Hotel and say, "Oh, we want those talks back." If you're interested in going,
They're
maybe
coming back.
we'll give them that push, that final push that they need,
Yeah,
if that is the case.
absolutely.
Sounds great. Sounds great. And Aris, when you're thinking of, you're saying, well, I need to do this new thing, whatever that new thing looks like. How do you approach it? Like, now that you're, maybe it's the typical PhD process, or I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
like you want to find out something or you want to work out with something. How would you approach a problem these days with all your knowledge on, being a PhD, all your knowledge in games? Has something changed, or is there some sort of process, steps that you follow? How does that work in your mind?
Well, I'll go back to what I said about taking things slowly and level by level. So I won't go into many details now because it's still work in progress, but I want to work a bit more on creating some articles series and some interviews. And don't worry, I'm not going to copy you here. Uh, but yeah, I also want to work on some new series of articles that I have in my head, and I want to approach people also in this case, taking it step by step, identifying what the issue is, writing down what steps are needed to be taken, and then using a lot of social media. I see that especially during the pandemic, there has been an increase of the use of social media, but also alternative platforms. For example, Discord or Twitter has been very prevalent, but platforms such as
Yeah.
Discord or Zoom have now entered our lives. So for my projects, for the things that I have in my head, I'm leaning a lot towards the use of these platforms because now they are becoming a standard. And every problem, the pandemic in this case, brings new solutions. So Zoom, Discord, some other platforms, some other ways of communication are now part of everyday life. And I have to catch up and get to learn them in a way. So yes, we never stop learning, and there's always something new happening, and it's an ordeal, to stay up to date. But I'm trying my best, and I always have new projects in my mind, and trying to find ways that what's going on in the world, these new platforms, in this case, can be applied as solutions to these tasks, to these problems that arise.
Yeah, sounds fantastic. It looks like you have it figured out, at least for the time being. It doesn't mean it won't
Theoretically,
require
yeah.
it won't require some iteration and some facing of reality. But yeah, sounds great. Just a quick break before we continue with this episode. If you've been enjoying this podcast, I would really appreciate if you share it with your friends and family and on social media. On Twitter and Instagram, it's at RobAlvarezB and the hashtag ProfessorGame, all one word. And in Facebook, you can find the Professor Game page. Thanks in advance for your engagement. So, Aris, what would you say, when somebody is thinking about working on something like what you're doing, perhaps on cultural aspects around games and so on? Would you give them some sort of recommendation or some sort of best practice when thinking about these things?
If I could say it simply, well, this is it's critical thinking. This is what is necessary. Going back to what I said about taking it slow and not rushing things. When I first started working on my PhD, and I knew I wanted to work and focus on online communities of video gaming, but back then I thought that by playing games and by participating in online communities, fans and being a fan is a very powerful process, if you like. But it can be empowering, but at the same time, it's also empowering for the industry. And when I started, I hadn't realized that. So by going into a more critical examination of how the industry works and how this relationship between the industry and the online communities of gaming fans work, I realized that the companies, and in this case, capitalism, always finds a way to benefit from everything that fans make. And I'm not saying this, to undermine the efforts of fans online when they gather as a community and they ask for something, or to say that by being a fan is not liberating or empowering. It can be, but at the same time, we have to keep in our mind that the companies, and this is very logical in this capitalistic society that we live, the capitalist society that we live in, that the companies will try to benefit from it because that's their purpose. They're profit-driven companies. So I would say critical thinking and always trying to see what is beyond, below the surface, because what might seem as empowering, liberating, and we're doing it for you, always has some other motives behind. So yes. I mean, it's how the world is structured, and we have to get ourselves more familiarized with how the world is structured and pretty much how things are being run.
All right. There you go, Engager. Some recommendations for sure. And Aris, continuing with the recommendations, what would you say is, a person, you've heard already Dan and probably some others as well, but would there be somebody you would be curious about hearing in an interview like this one on Professor Game?
I have, two that just came to my mind. First, and we talked about it last time we met each other, I would really like to know the opinion of Ian Bogost on gamification and applying games to our and gamification to our everyday lives, but also a person who deals with that topic but from a little different perspective, and I had the pleasure to meet a few years ago. Elis Bartholomeus is game designer here, very active here in the Netherlands, and she has also written this book about applying game philosophy to everyday lives and to our everyday lives, and how to structure our lives in levels, and how present ourselves tasks in order to level up. So yes, I found it really wonderful that there is actually a game designer who's very aware of how life is also and can be approached as a game, and has written a book about it. So certainly these two, I think they can have talk about some really great topics.
Absolutely. And you actually mentioned the word book, so that's the next thing I'm going to ask you. Is there a book that you recommend to the engagers, to the audience here, hungry for stuff around games and gamification?
Yes. So I would start with something that I read last year, and it really, really made me think. That would be The Toxic Meritocracy of Video Games, Why Gaming Culture is the Worst, by Christopher Paul. So in this book, pretty much the author explains how games give these and gaming cultures, participating in gaming cultures, sometimes gives a very wrong impression that there is balance in real life, because games are supposed to be balanced, and as I said, lead you from the easy part to the harder part while you have had time to accumulate experience, and pretty much everything is structured so in a way to give players an opportunity to win and beat the game. But he explains that despite that, we might think that because of our familiarity with games, we might think that life is also structured like this. It's quite the opposite, and takes many examples from gaming cultures that show that people who play games and people who like balance do not necessarily participate in balanced environments, and do not participate in a balanced and equal gaming cultures. And a very prevalent example would be the Gamergate scandal that took place a few years ago, in which female members of gaming communities were had their lives put in jeopardy because of really high. And now I'm simplifying it. It's a really deep issue, but in a few words, some parts of some sexist wings, let's say, of video game cultures try to threat and not try to, but actually threatened female gamers and members of the gaming community because they thought that this way they are going to cleanse gaming communities and they would see an imbalance and they would see the male sex as being endangered in the gaming communities, which is far
Wow.
from truth. Yeah. So, yes, this book certainly, because it really opens up a perspective of how gaming culture has been structured and that there's nothing balanced and equal in them. But also, I would go really back to the basics and suggest people reading Homo Ludens by Johann Huizinga and Man Play and Games by Roger Caillois, which are two games that explain how playfulness and the playful aspect are part of everyday life and human life, and people are playful beings. So sometimes people might think that games is something that you live in the past while you grow up, but that's also quite far from truth because as human beings, play is inherent to our nature. So certainly these books.
The last one you mentioned was Man Playing Games.
Yes, Man Playing Games.
Trying to look it up. I'll ask you maybe afterwards. All right,
Sure.
very good recommendations. And keeping up that streak of recommendations, and this is a difficult one. What would you say is your favorite game?
Okay, I'm not sure if it's something that I would recommend because it's not a great game, but it's very dear to me. That would be Tekken 2. It's an old fighting game, but it's a game I grew up with, and I have fond memories of it. Going back to the discussion of balance, it's not a very balanced game, but it also teaches you this about games and life being not very balanced. But it's an old fighting game that I hold dear because I grew up playing with it, and yeah, the nostalgia factor is high here. So yeah, in the end, I think there's nothing wrong with feeling nostalgic about games and going back to your past to play games. Same with Super Mario World 2. Yoshi's Island is another favorite game of mine, and yeah. If you want me to recommend games, I would certainly recommend people playing retro
Which is the
games.
favorite? Yoshi's Island then?
Oh, yeah, Yoshi's Island and Tekken. Yeah, but
Island and
yeah,
Tekken.
because you link this to through a recommendation question. Yeah, I would also recommend people to going back and playing old games and seeing how the industry started and seeing how we came to the part that we to the place that we are now. It's very fundamental to have an understanding of the gaming industry and how we came
Amazing.
here. Yeah.
Amazing. And talking about games, the game culture and all these things, what would you say within this world in which we are, in which we're discussing, what would you say is your sort of superpower, that thing that you do at least better than most other people?
Oh, um, that also took work, but I think, yeah, I'm not sure how it will sound. Maybe it will sound a bit ominous, but not being too easily enthusiastic about new announcements anymore. Yeah, because yeah, when I was younger, I was pretty much enthusiastic about everything. Like, oh, a new console has been announced, or a new game, or a new remastered version of a game, and I was so thrilled when these things happened. But now I realize that I shouldn't always be too enthusiastic about them and take everything with a grain of salt here, because sometimes yeah, these new announcements might not be true. There have been many consoles that were announced and never came out, for example, or a remaster is just. It's not really a remaster, but it's just an emulated version for a new console, and you have to pay €60 for an emulated version of a game that you already own. So yes, not rushing to pay an X amount of money for something that you might not need. So yes, going back to what I said about critical thinking, like slow down, take a moment, and realize what is going on here with every new announcement.
Well, that just makes me think, and I probably commented it more than once in the podcast that I now have more games than I can play.
Oh, me too. Me too.
And it's a tragedy of you're super young and you're super excited about games. You have all the time in the world to play all those games, and of course you don't have the money to get more
Yeah,
games or
I know.
or to have more consoles or whatever. Now you start having the money, you just don't have the time.
I know, yeah, yeah, and I have over 200 games on my Steam library, and
There you
probably
go.
probably a same amount of physical games on various consoles. And let's say it's in my bucket list that I want
Yeah.
before I die to play at least to play all of them at least once. I'm not saying to finish them, but at least try to get a few minutes of gameplay so that I know that okay, I know what I bought and I know what I used my money for. So yeah, it's a hard task. It will take years, but yeah, I hope I
Yeah,
will
and it'll also
get
require the
there.
most difficult thing, right? Not buying new ones.
Yes, yes. Oh, that's something that I need, and people need to practice self-control on, and that's why I try to avoid all those websites that advertise discounts and game bundles and all those things. I know it's difficult. I know it's difficult. It takes a lot of practice, but yeah. Well, in the end, if you want to buy a game, who am I to stop you from buying it?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
just keep in mind that yeah, in the end, you might not have time to play it ever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Aris, it's been a huge pleasure. Thank you so much for participating with us, for coming to the Professor Game podcast.
Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, sure. And this is a time for you. If you have any final words, anywhere you want to lead us to, like your webpage, I don't know. It's whatever you want to go for. It's your, it's your time.
Yeah, well, one last thing that I want to say, and I briefly touched upon it earlier, but I want to say again, play is an inherent human trait. Do not be afraid to embrace it. People think that games are something you forget when you grow up. It's not true. We play in our entire life, and we yeah, just keep on playing. Just be playful, keep on playing, embrace playfulness, always with a critical reflection. And yeah, as for my pages, it's cult slash evasion.net, so cultivation, but so it's a combination of the word cult as culture, but also cultivate. It's my page that I started when I started my PhD, and I wanted to keep working on that page while I also cultivate myself. So cult slash evasion.net, cultivation .net, and on Twitter I'm Aris Emmanouloudis, and
That you can find in the show notes.
say yeah, same on LinkedIn and academia. So yeah, just keep on playing.
Let's do this. Let's do this. So thank you again, Aris. Very welcome to have you on the podcast. We also made an interview on the other direction for the Arcade Hotel magazine. Is that the name, right?
Correct. Yes.
So if you want to find it, you can find it there. It's a written post. In that case, I'd be happy to share it as well in the show notes if you wish. However, engagers, at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over. Hey, engagers, thank you for listening to the Professor Game podcast, and I hope you enjoyed this interview with Aris. And, it's always fantastic to have you here. So I'm always sharing stuff on social media, especially on Twitter is where I'm most active. I'm sharing the interviews. Every now and then I'm sharing articles. I'm responding to people there as well. I'm reaching out to people too. So if you want to find me on Twitter, all you have to do is go to professorgame.com/Twitter. And before you click continue, before you go on to your next mission, remember to subscribe or follow, whatever that looks like, for free on your favorite podcast app so that you listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.